All right. It looks like everybody has made it in now, or just about. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Wendy Van Verlo. I'm the Executive Director of NAPSA, and it is my distinct privilege to be with you today, as always. I'm very excited about our topic and about our excellent speakers that we have today. Just have a couple of small announcements and a little housekeeping, and then we will get started. You may be watching our website. We do have a new website, napsa.org, and some great resources on there, including upcoming webinars. This is the last one that's currently posted, but just giving you a first opportunity to kind of put this down in your calendar. The next one will be released probably within the next day or two, and that will be March 30th at 1 p.m., talking about how culture can help pretrial systems in their success. So March 30th, 1 p.m. Central, pen that down, and then we will get that out very soon. Also, if you check, and I'll throw this into the chat, if you check our webinar and upcoming trainings page, there's also a calendar of events. And so we have started populating that with partner events. And so I just this week added some from APPR. So there is one that is actually next week that APPR is doing on February 11th on a pretrial services report. So again, I will throw the NAPSA website into the chat here in just a second, but just to keep an eye on that page, we're adding content to it regularly, and hopefully it'll be a nice spot for you to find trainings and opportunities that you can take advantage of and your staff can take advantage of. Another thing, our conference is coming up, going to be in August. And so we currently have requests for workshop proposals. That portal is open right now, and we will be accepting proposals through March 2nd. I will also put that website into the chat here in just one moment. And that's the end of my NAPSA announcements and key things to know about right now. Just a couple housekeeping things. The chat is available for you to use and chat with participants and chat with everybody here. But if you have questions, the best place to put those is the Q&A feature. So if you look down at the bottom, you see Q&A. That way, our speakers today, Brian and Hillary, can keep track, and I can help keep track of those questions a lot better, and they don't get lost. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our presenters. I'm very excited to introduce Hillary Hartoin. She is one of our board members as well, our at-large director. So excited for her to join us today. And Hillary, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us late afternoon, midweek. And taking some time out of your schedule to learn a little bit more about the coach referee model for change in pretrial supervision. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Hillary Hartoin, and as Wendy said, I am the at-large director for NAPSA that I run and oversee a pretrial release program in Cass County, Indiana, a small rural community. So I'm like many of you out there that we see you guys leaving your locations in the chat. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Lovins to introduce himself, and then we're going to share with you today.
Hillary, you know it's Brian. It's not Dr. Lovins. I don't do any medical procedures on anyone. So Brian is fine. So welcome everyone. Super excited. It's been a long time since I've seen many of you. I looked at the list and super excited to have you guys in for the conversation today. As Wendy said and Hillary said, our conversation today is really around the coach referee model for change and the application of it in pretrial. But before we get started, I want to, for those that I haven't had an opportunity to meet, give you a little bit of a background. So I've worked in the field for over 30 years. I was at the University of Cincinnati for a decade in the 2000s with Ed Latessa. And then I went to Harris County. And so Houston, Texas, I was over top of their community corrections department, or their assistant director of the community corrections department. And there we had a relationship with our local pretrial department. There was a county department, but we also served folks in pretrial status as well. And so really leaned into this space and started to learn more about the work and about what the differences are between probation, pretrial, and really interesting stories about sort of where that space has been and where it's been for the last decade or two. And so today we're going to walk through that. We're going to talk a little bit about the current model and what we're exploring and what we've been thinking about, what we've been working with Hillary, who's been an awesome partner in this work, and where the struggles are, right? And so as we think about pretrial, right? And Hillary, you jump in here. I think what we all are grounded in, and I don't know how familiar you are with the jobs to be done, but I think it's a really important theory to center ourselves on. The jobs to be done theory was built out of the 1980s. It sort of came out of IBM, and that there was an engineer, an inventor in IBM that created a tool or created a product that he was really proud of and super excited about and thought it was going to, be this huge change. He built it and then no one bought it. No one used it. While it was really interesting and unique and gave a really cool opportunity, as an innovative way of doing something, it didn't get the job to be done. It didn't serve the purpose of the people. And so people didn't purchase it. And out of that, the tool died. But what came out of that was this theory of the job to be done. The job to be done is sort of twofold, but ultimately, if you think of it, it's what is the thing that I'm being bought or being hired to do? And how do I align with that? And how do I find the things that help me do it? Right? Or how do I develop a strategy that helps me get to the end result? And the job to be done in pretrial, I think, is really clear. It's probably the most clear job to be done out of the whole criminal justice system, right? When we think of probation or post adjudication, we have all sorts of punishment rules, right? Or reasons for punishment. You've got rehabilitation, you've got retributive justice, you've got just deserts, you've got deterrence. None of that really plays out in pretrial. The job to be done is really easy to figure out. Help people who've been arrested and released come back to court, stay out of trouble during that time, and administer justice fairly. And so, Hillary, I'm curious, like in your experience, sort of in Cass County, like how does this play out? How do these three things, like you work closely with judges and prosecutors and defense attorneys, like, are these still the three things that really focus that pretrial should be focused on?
I think so. I mean, as we've really delved into the coaching model, we've tried to leverage some of the wonderful benefits, the positive unintended consequences. But the heart of what we do is really making sure that we keep the courts running efficiently and that we administer justice fairly while honoring the presumption of innocence. And I think especially where I'm from in Indiana, that is like the hardest thing to walk the line on is because in Indiana, most of the pretrial agencies live with under probation. And that can really steer us away from the main tenets of what bail is. And that's assuring court appearance and preventing new arrests. With doing that, I think where we get stuck is in our efforts to do this, there's a lot of unintended consequences that really undermine the spirit of what pretrial was, which was to ensure that we were employing a process that really honored someone's humanity and dignity and that they were an innocent person in an effort to ensure public safety or court appearance, we may have sacrificed that a little bit.
Can you say more about that? What do you like? What do you think has been the misalignment or the sacrifices that folks have had to give up, like between personal freedom, innocence, or not guilty yet, or presumed innocence to like the application of the system?
So in Indiana, especially in our county, we came from like a very punitive mindset with that. And people were, if they made one mistake during the pretrial period, they were detained. And back in the day, you guys all know my story. You've heard from me countless times. You know, we had a very overcrowded jail, over 40% overcrowded. But a lot of that was rooted in that decision making that it was perfection. And to do that, and the reason people were falling short of that is we weren't staying true to the core essence of what bail was. We were over conditioning people. People also didn't have the opportunity to engage in anything in our county to be successful because all the supports lived in post-conviction. And we'll talk about this more, but this really kind of teed up why we wanted to do something different. Is historically, you think of pretrial is that you're entering pleas to exit jail. In Cass County, people were entering pleas for community corrections and probation, even if they were low risk, just to get access to treatment, because we're a rural county and that's where it lived, to get substance use treatment. So those were like the sacrifices that we were making that kind of didn't align with our values.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think one of the things that is true that you said was like, judges operate probation or are connected to probation in many of our jurisdictions. Judges are connected to pretrial and sort of establish that. And so I think like this idea of conditioning, right, and having conditions of pretrial release. I think what's a struggle for me when we really dig into this is people are struggling with following the law before they got arrested, or that's why they got arrested. In many cases, sometimes they're identified as lower risk, and it just was a sort of out of norm behavior. But for a lot of the people, it sort of was this space where it was like things were unraveling for them. And then they come to court, they get released, and somehow those things are supposed to stop unraveling and they're supposed to be able to make it to a court date at 11 and come to a probation officer, a pretrial supervisor officer on Tuesday at 3 and take 3 drug tests and pay for it. Like, I think that's a real burden.
Yeah, it definitely is a real burden, especially in today's economic climate and in a rural community. And I think the problem wasn't with us as individuals, it's just the structure wasn't there. And we had to reimagine that because historically the system was built to just kind of ignore the very essence of what pretrial was to protect that person's individual liberty. But we developed a system that actually was taking that away, and we weren't looking at their needs. And when I talk to my judges about it or tell my story, I believe we thought we were putting a pause button on someone's crisis until the disposition or sentence of a case. And then we were setting these really high standards that weren't individualized. Oftentimes they didn't help community safety and they didn't help someone be successful. And we were creating more barriers instead of more transitions for people to be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And right. And it's like, and if we start to think about even the conditions of supervision, right? Like what helps people get to court, right? We know the research right now is really limited on the availability because they think most pretrial departments, much like ours and Harris did, much like the probation side of it did, was sort of like thought we would just monitor folks and they would show up and they would jump through the hoops and they would do the thing. So, right, like, but if you think about when we look at the research, we know court reminders work, right? Because like that makes sense. I if I didn't have reminders, I would miss every dentist appointment I've ever had because it's 6 months out and it's not a normal routine. And I think for people, court's not a normal routine. It's maybe a tragic event or a worrisome one. But when it's not in the norm, you need reminders, right? And so I think that's why we see it. What I found, I don't know your experience is, I found that when we drug tested people, it actually, anecdotally, I haven't seen a lot of research on this on the pretrial side, but for us in Harris, it actually like led to people not showing up because they were worried that they were going to test positive and go back to jail, and they had a substance use problem they couldn't control.
Historically, it definitely was like that because of people's past experiences on supervision, and living in spaces where it was that referee response that the day you step into the pretrial office, or at that time it was the probation department, you suddenly had to be substance free, no matter how many years that you struggled. with that, and that can lead people to pull away. What we've really tried to do is build that relationship. If we do order drug screening, what is the purpose of that? Is that to know and support and to help that person get connected to where they need to be safe, whether that's voluntary inpatient treatment or with our counseling staff, or is it just to detain them back? So it really goes back to what we'll talk about later, the mindset behind why we're doing that.
Yeah, I think it's the job to be done, right? Like the job to be done is if it's to get them back to court and to help prevent some intervention or some new crime. I mean, I guess in one way, like catching them breaking rules and putting them in jail stops them from committing a crime. But I think we can, as we explore this model and as we explore different ways of doing things, I think we can get to a point where we can actually affect that stuff but not have to put them in jail for that, right? And I think that's where, at least, and look, I fully recognize like my world is not as in depth in the pretrial space yet as yours. I've worked in it, worked in the field for 20 years or 30 years now. But the way I see it is much like what we've done around the rest of the criminal justice system is that the judges ordered conditions and our staff were sort of trained to be referees, right? And so let me take a step back. And if people haven't heard the coach referee model for change, let me give you sort of a really quick high dose of like what a referee is. And so, if you think of what a referee does in a game, right? That's what we're talking about. Referees stand on the sidelines. They have the rule book. They know the punishment or the consequence that a person gets. It's preset at times, right? They don't decide, oh, I'm going to give you this and that. It's a predefined matrix of consequences for actions. And their job is to look for people breaking the rules. They maintain the process, right? They blow the whistle, they start the game, they call balls and strikes. But at the end of the day, they're looking for rule breaking. And when they see rule breaking, they throw a flag, they blow a whistle, they give a penalty. We get compliance at times, but here's the thing. There isn't a single professional game ever that hasn't had some rule breaking in it. So if referees changed behavior and catching people failing stopped them from doing it, we would have games that were flawless, that there weren't rule breaking. The reality is that's not how any of us operate. We all struggle at times with things. And so referees, this sort of idea of a referee is I'm going to give you something, I'm going to watch you, I'm going to monitor you, and if you fail, I'm going to bring you back in and consequence you. And I'm curious, you were around during the sort of the days that pretrial moved from providing interventions and services and treatment to sort of the last decade of the world of like pretrial isn't for treatment. These are folks that are presumed innocent. You don't need treatment if you're presumed innocent. And I would suggest that we got there not because people who made those decisions were too far from the ground and didn't see people struggling. I think what they got there for was they were canceling referees, right? That they were saying people on pretrial shouldn't go to jail if they don't engage in treatment services. If they don't jump through this hoop, they shouldn't go to jail for not jumping through a hoop. They should go to jail maybe for missing a court date or for committing new crimes, but they shouldn't go for administrative rule breaking. And so instead of changing the rule breaking, instead of changing the mechanism that created the rule breaking, conditions of supervision and what we're asking people and how we're getting them to do it, I think what we thought about was, well, let's just cancel them doing it. And so lots of places across the country, I would say, moved somewhat as a system, not as workers, but as a system, we moved to more of this. Like Pretrial staff was just like, okay, we're going to remind you to go to court. We're going to meet with you, but we're not going to do anything with you. We're not going to provide treatment services or intervention, because if we did that and we put it on the condition and you failed it, the judge is going to want to put you back in jail. Again, not for committing a new crime, but for not going to a program or not doing this thing. And I'm curious, like, your experience, is that right? Is that like,
I think so.
is that how we got there?
I think that is how we got there because we all see the needs, even though we're now in this place where we're slowly the pendulum's going back and we're bringing back in supportive services. We were so afraid of the over conditioning and court ordering treatment and taking away people's rights that we shut down and turned the other way to their needs. So instead of working through that and having a dialogue about voluntary engagement, we just kind of hit whack-a-mole and took things out with the referees or violating people for not really bail violations, but for not doing what we thought they should do. And I think where that really was a failing is where people are struggling the most is behavioral health, it's substance use, it's housing. There's lots of different pathways to success for people there. And we can't court order or prescribe that remedy because judges aren't clinicians. And we were putting them in that space. And instead of going back and we overcorrected.
I think so. I think it's the culture of the United States in the last 30 years. If we don't like something, we cancel it. Versus, because they think we've given up or banged our heads so many times to try to change systems, because they're for status quo. They're designed to withstand change, right? Like, think about it. The court system generally looks the same for the last 100 years. Someone gets arrested, they come in, they have a hearing, they set bail or bond or a decision to release, they get set out, the prosecutor, defense attorney meet, they have a meeting, they have a court date, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. It's the same thing, right? So the system was designed for it to flow the same way. And if you come in and create some disruption, the system's going to push on that, right? And make it come back to status quo. And I think that's why I would say, why we were so adamant in the last decade to not give treatment services to individuals that are struggling, because we didn't want that to lead to people going to jail. But then what happens is, and I saw it in Harris, the longer that we have people on pretrial, especially post-COVID, that the process slowed down a little bit. The longer people are on, the more likely they are to get picked up again because they're struggling. Right? Someone with a serious substance use issue can't just turn it off because a judge in a robe said, don't use drugs on pretrial anymore, right? Like, and so then eventually they did get picked up again. Now they have 2 possession charges and 3 possession charges, where maybe if they engaged in treatment early on, they may not have gotten any or any additional ones. So I think that's really where I struggle with this cancel world. And to be honest, is, how we got to the coaching model. And so let's talk about like what that is and what it looks like and how we got here. And then let's dig in. What does it look like, right? Like, the why, I think, is important, because our having a North Star that we're pointing at and remembering the job to be done is incredibly important. And we've got to figure out sort of how that works, right? And how we get that connected. And so if we think of the coaching model, right? And why we created this sort of juxtaposition. Coaches don't just stand on the sideline, right? They're invested in their players. They're interested in the outcome. They're not neutral, right? If we think of our system, we've created an entire series of neutral participants, right? If you think of what we say to pretrial department or pretrial officers all the time is like firm but fair, balanced. You're not invested, right? Like we've created this like almost like this unintended consequence of you are oh what's the word neutral, non-invested, right, in the outcome. And I think coaches are invested in the outcome, right? And so we start to think about a coach and curious about, your staff have been doing it for a little over a year now, right? When we think about a coach, we start to explore, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but really four dimensions. The first one is approach. This idea that we believe people can change, they're trying their best, and with support, they can be successful. And I'm curious from your perspective, like your staff sort of adopted that really quickly and really openly. Do you think it's important that the staff believe that, and the people under supervision or people on pretrial, that you think it's important that they believe that they're trying their best and that they can change?
I really do, because I've seen it live out. And what's more transformative for me that validates that is that my judges see it. Because when someone who comes into our system is at the crisis point of their life, sometimes it's the hardest time for them. They come in broken, but when someone comes alongside to them and tells them, we believe you can do this and we believe you can be successful, it totally energizes them to take that next step, whether it's you just offering them a hand and giving them a suggestion to, hey, you want to meet with our counselor today? They're here to help you. They can talk to you about housing or about your mental health if you're struggling today. We can take that deeper. It's really energizes people who are really beat down in the system, especially of those who's not their first time. What's really been transformative for us is that I even have my judges doing it. So my judge, as she's reading the condition, is saying, I believe that you can be successful as we go over those standard terms of pretrial release. And we've set it up and frame it in a way that at every intercept it's being reinforced, you can be successful and you can do this. And I've seen that make a difference in our outcomes. And it's kind of shined a light on other areas of community supervision that maybe have a different approach. And it's led some cultural change here. So it really does make a difference. And you have when you don't believe someone can change and you come in and we're just, root in the job, we can transfer that onto the people that we interact with, whether we intend to or not.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the difference between a referee is this impartiality, right? That's the word I was trying to remember before. It was impartialness, right? That they're impartial, that they think about who pays a referee salary. A team doesn't. The league pays it to keep the process going, to keep the rules moving, and it's almost like, right, like when you think of this analogy, and I'm always sort of excited and shocked and like that it plays out almost across all of our stuff, right? If you think of it, like our job is to get them to go back to court. It's a process, right? It's our job is to administer the rules of pretrial, to feed back information to the judge. All of those things are really referee like. And when we think of referees, we think of people who are not, that the outcome isn't contingent or shouldn't be contingent on them. Now, if you followed the NFL for the last couple of years, we know that everyone agrees with me as a Bengals fan that the referees are definitely in favor of the Kansas City Chiefs and that they cheat for the Chiefs, but most time they're supposed to be impartial, right? And so, right, but in all seriousness, we've defined them as this impartial body of people. Like, even look at our data, right? We rarely know our own success rates in our field. We know the clients or the persons at the individual level. We know our org stuff, But what if I told you your win-loss record as a pretrial supervision officer is 91% wins, or your win-loss record is 32%, and that the people you see fail 68% of the time, 58%. Like all of a sudden it starts to put our work in a different place, but we don't know that. We often know the procedural things. Did you get your reports in on time? Did you get your notes on time? Did you meet the people as designed? And we have to really start to think about, I think, as a coach, what it is with my skill set. How can I best serve this individual to help them reach their potential, get them through this process, which is look, it's an uncomfortable, shitty process. No one wants to be arrested. No one wants to go to court. No one wants to be convicted. No one wants to go to prison. All of those things are true. And so, how do we help align that for people so that they can be the most successful they can be? And we know that there's all sorts of barriers to get there, right? And so I think that's really, so we'll keep talking about the coaching stuff in context, but that's where I wanted to shift for a second, right? So I want to explore this because this is sort of tantamount to the coaching model, is that the job to be done is to get people where they want to be, right? It's to help them see what that is. Sometimes they don't have a perspective of that. But as a coach, what I want to always understand is where my players want to go, where they currently are, and what's standing in their way that I can help maneuver them through, help work through it, help connect them to, help them get resources, help them support them through that process so that they can get the outcome they want. Now, what's interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is that in a post-adjudication world, the goal is to help them thrive in their own life, right? Pretrial is a little different. It's because you could do all the things that you do, and the person could still go to prison. Where in a post-adjudication world, the outcome is the outcome, right? Like we're trying to affect people not going back to prison, but the person might be guilty, right? The consequence may be that they end in prison. How do you get your staff head around their job isn't necessarily to change the outcome of the offense or the punishment of the original underlying crime, but it's to help the person get to that point regardless of what the final adjudication is?
I think it's a clear definition of roles. So when you are, especially if you worked in probation or community corrections before, and you're used to being that referee, pretrial is a little different because that person is presumed innocent. And when you're a referee, it's easy to assume that you're a little bit the judge, and that when you give that sanction that they're already guilty. So it's clarifying the roles that, my job isn't, I'm going to support this person whether they're guilty or innocent, because at the end of the day, they're a person and they're just as much a member of the community as I am. And my job is to help them get through the court process, make that as comfortable as possible for them, because when they're succeeding and they're connecting in resources, my community is safer as well. And there's a big emphasis today on public safety, but what we need to realize is when we stabilize and we center that person, and we make them realize that they're worthy of that help and engaging in those services, that they're less likely going to commit those new offenses or miss court dates or abscond. And in turn, we're going to have the end goal that both the judge and the prosecutor wants, as well as myself, my staff, and maybe more the public defender, of seeing that person really transform and make a difference in their lives. And I think if you really dig down and you talk to your judges and their prosecutors, that our goals are a lot closer than what we think they are. But we have to remove that off the plate, because that's not my role, and really clarify that. My role isn't to be the referee to determine whether you're guilty or innocent. My job is to walk alongside you and to help you be successful in making your court appearances. How can I coach you through that, whether it's problem solving, scheduling, or connecting you with childcare or transportation? How can I remove those barriers? And sometimes different barriers pop up along the way. So how can we do that and navigate the system in a way that's going to help you be successful and do that? So that's kind of how we do that with our staff, is really redefine what the space is.
Yeah, I really love that, right? Like you're like it almost even the coaching model almost fits even better, right? Because it's like your job is to be the person next to them who helps shape them and give them plays, if you will, helps them figure out how to navigate this space that they've not been in or they've been in 1,000 times, right? It doesn't matter. Like it's like it's the center of the unit of analysis really should be the person. And how do we help navigate you through this process? If you want treatment, let's get you connected. If you need resources, let's get those for you. Not as a, right? And I think this is the difference in my head of why the coaching model has been so successful across the country is because coaches get people to do things without threats of punishment. And I think referees only have a threat of punishment. If you think of the authority of a referee, the only authority a referee has is to blow a whistle and kick you out of the game. And so you follow a referee's rules or follow the referee's guidance, if you will, or you follow the rules of the system or the game because you're afraid of the consequence. And so the only way a referee gets you to do something is by being afraid of the consequence and wanting to avoid it. A coach gets people like my son plays high school baseball. I can't get him up before 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, no matter what. That guy can get him up at 4:45 to be at baseball at 5:15 3 times a week, right? Like because he's inspiring them. He has expectations for them. He's supporting them. He's linking them to something he wants to play baseball and to be good, right? Like coaches get people to do things all the time that aren't court ordered, if you will, or result in a punishment, but it's because of their relationship. And so I think that's the second piece that I'm curious about is the second piece of the coaching model, how we get people from where they are to where they want to be and help identify what's getting in their way is through building a meaningful connection with them. We know, though, our system isn't designed for meaningful connections. It's designed as a staging process. It's designed as a conveyor belt that people move through. How have your staff taken on this new sort of approach of like, maybe not new, but at least permitted approach of connection matters, right? And that you're not going to move anyone without a connection.
I think we took it back a step further, that we've replaced over conditioning with connection to get people to the place that we need to go. And I think that's really the fear of pretrial when we talk about supportive services or treatment, again, is we don't want to shift back into the referee mode where we're over conditioning people. But when my staff realize or my stakeholders realize that I can get people the same way when I connect with them and I motivate them, we can get the same outcome and honor what pretrial is about. That really is when the light bulbs went off that we need to invest in this. With my staff, they weren't happy seeing people fail. And there for a while, when our performance measures were stagnating, because we look at our success rates here. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a data nerd. All 230 of you logged on. Now I can tell you in a moment's notice what our success rate was. But they feel it. And I think anyone, whether you're in probation or community corrections, or even those who are the actors in court, you feel it when it's day after day, you see people failing, and they don't want to do that. So when you show them a way where they can invest in someone and then they celebrate that win with that person, Maybe someone has really struggled to make it to their court appearances, that you've mapped out a way and you've brought in some resources to help them do that. And all of a sudden they've made 3 in succession. That's a huge win for you because you're invested. And then suddenly your job means something again and you're not burned out. So that's how we've gotten them vested in that, as well as we put the purpose back in pretrial a little bit. So the
I love
person and
that.
the person and the purpose is there again. So we're helping the people in the community, but we're also giving purpose back to our staff in a world that was kind of stripped of its meaning. It was black and white for a while, and we've infused color back into it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. We're putting the purpose back in pretrial, right? Like it's, I think we, again, in good effort or good intentions, we canceled support and treatment in pretrial across the country because we didn't like the response people got that didn't go to treatment. And instead of really changing the response or how we get them there, we thought about just getting rid of it. And I think you're absolutely right. This empowers our staff to have an impact on people, right? And let's be honest, like if I have a serious substance use issue and I get into treatment, even if I go to prison or even if I go to jail for 6 months or even if I go to probation, aren't I better off in all 3 of those settings if I've worked on my substance use issue in this short run? Aren't I better off in those systems too, right? And so I think it's this like, I think it's to your point, it's the purpose of why we do this work. And and if you think of it, I think your point's well heard, and that when we think of data and we think of these outcomes, having our staff invested in people showing back up to court and having them invested in staying out of trouble is really important. I got really excited, you guys, because Hillary texted me. If you know Hillary, you can get a text from her at 1 in the morning, and that either means she's up late or she's already up for the morning. She sleeps about as much as I do, so it's a symbiotic relationship. And she texted me and said, "I'm incredibly excited." Right, and so Hillary, I don't want to steal your thunder, but tell us about the person that is like multiple histories within the system, multiple struggles, multiple failures, and like how did he show up this last week and for you and your interaction?
Yeah, I had a client that we took on pretrial because our judges are really invested in this as well. And we've expanded it, as I've taught you guys before, about alternate responses. So he came to me on a failure to appear, and the judge wanted to give him a second chance. And we all know that we have players in our system who have played the game multiple times. They're that client who keeps coming back. And I wanted to give this person a chance as well. And judge says, "Do you think he can be successful?" And I says, "Yeah, I'm going to invest in him and see where we can go." And for those of you who know my story, it wasn't always easy. So I had actors from the other side, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about culture and stuff like that, who said this person isn't going to be successful. Well, this was a case that kind of drew out a long time because it was a higher level felony. And I really got to invest in this person. He's someone that I worked with personally and got to walk alongside him. Through a couple hiccups along the way, he wasn't totally perfect, but we didn't respond with a stick. We just kept giving him carrots to help him be successful. And we're nearing the end of his time where he's going to reach disposition in a few weeks. And judge just wanted an update on it. He says, "I know that isn't the purpose of pretrial, but can you tell me all that he's accomplished?" So we went through, and this person, I'm going to call him Sam, he really went above and beyond in the pretrial period. He completed inpatient treatment. He reunited with his children and did some domestic violence programming, not a court order in sight, because if you know me as well, my judges don't get away with that. As well. But he voluntarily really was investing in himself because we were able to get him to recognize his value. Well, the judge recognized that in court and praised him as like, "This is the first time you've not only made all your court appearances, but I've actually seen you better yourself. during this period on pretrial. I'm really proud of you. And he gave him his next court dates, and the person, Sam, came down to meet with me, and he was down on himself a little bit because he had struggled that weekend. You know, that the addiction had reared its head a little bit. He didn't relapse, but he was struggling with his mental health, and he shared that with me. And I said, well, what did you do? And he walked me through the different coping skills and problem solving skills that we had walked through so he didn't reoffend again, so that he could come back to court and he didn't go back to that. And one thing that stuck with me that he says, well, really, Hillary, I just played all the plays that you told me to. And I guess I am successful. And that really energized me and made me excited, because at that point, I knew that person didn't need pretrial services anymore. They didn't need conditions of release. They were navigating the system on their own. Someone that no one thought would be successful just by looking at them on paper and about their past history of failures to appear or of reoffending. And fast forward 6 to 8 months, and you don't recognize them, and here they are, and they've done it. And I really think that in a world where it can get so negative, and you think about your actors in court, we only show up in court when people fail. We don't show up to celebrate them being successful. It's really hard on the other teammates as well that I'm sitting there at the table with. We all walked away really energized and kind of looking at the system about, this is why we really do it. So that was something I was just super excited about. And it really reinforced, this is why we do what we do. This is why I did something different that people, you know, a few years ago thought I was a little bit crazy for intersecting two different worlds. But it reminded me that, you know, it's worth the chance.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And I keep going back to this model right here, right? Like we built case plans and we built conditions of supervision and in conditions of pretrial and all these things. But really, if we could center what we call a success plan, right, in the coaching model, but if we could center this concept into pretrial, right? Like now the problem is if you think of it, we haven't built tools to help us do that either, right? Like the assessments that we have are what I call tier one assessments. They're risk based, that are about criminal history or about history in the system. And so, right, so you start to see like, okay, they had 2 prior failures. They had a new arrest while under supervision or under pretrial. They failed probation, right? All these sort of tags that aren't about change. So the problem is when I look at this and they say, where are they? Sort of what we have in our system is historical data points. How have you and your staff gotten the data, the information about what's standing in their way, right? So if I had 2 prior failures, I don't know why. The assessment doesn't tell me why you failed or what the purpose or how you got there. It just assumes, right? And I think what's true probably until about 5 or 6 years ago, and we did a study in Lake County and Cook that was really cool around like what are the drivers of failure to show. And I think we've historically thought it was just willfully not showing up. And for a lot of people, it's not willful not showing up. They want to get the process done. They don't want it hung over their head. There are other things. How did your team translate a risk assessment, if you will? How did they find the data points to understand what's keeping them from being successful? Like, what's the job to be done?
I think it was a little bit hard at first. So Indiana, we have the IRAS or the ORAS, and you really think of it, the last 3 questions of that are a little bit more dynamic. We're not looking at those static factors. So that was our first kind of toe in the water, that we knew if they answered yes to, or they scored high with residential stability or with substance use or with failure to appear, that that's our first clue to dig a little bit deeper. And then we started to look at supplemental assessments, that were appropriate in the pretrial space, which can be challenging. We use the ACOK, but rather than really adopt another checkbox of another needs assessment and really fatigue this person, we've just really learned about how to connect and ask our questions in a way that we already are doing. So we're not implementing another thing, where we can kind of get to the root cause or the root barriers to what that is. So spending more time with that person and connecting with them. So the risk assessment is still unbiased and objective. That release decision is still based on that. But when that person does come to us, how can we connect with them in a way that we can more problem solve? We need to build that trust and rapport, because they're going to be hesitant to connect with us as well. So you can't rush it. But how can we connect with them in a way that we can quickly identify that, those barriers, so that we can have some quick wins with that person? Because when we can get them to be successful early on in little things, they're going to be more motivated to take that bigger step and maybe work around and navigate that bigger barrier, such as substance use.
Yeah. Oh, no, go ahead.
So that's kind of how we decided to do that. And at that time, you were right, Brian, there was no tool to help us do that. So it was really a lot of trial and error, whether it's how we do that first initial intake appointment with someone and what questions we ask, and do that. And then it just kind of became a natural connection and conversation with that person, to do that and to help them disclose to us or help us kind of illuminate for them some areas of need that we saw and present them as resources to them to do. So we give the carrots to them, maybe to say, are those resources or doors for them to walk through to be successful. And we kind of steer them in that direction. One thing that we're really passionate about, or that my judge is really passionate about as well, is, with all the resources we have, we let that person have full agency and choice in what they engage in. And I think that's really important too in the pretrial space, is, again, I'm not prescribing their path. I'm letting them choose their path to success and what's important to them at that moment. And that's honoring that agency and that presumption of innocence. And that's how we're different than our post-conviction counterpart. And when we do that, we realize that more people want help than we ever realized.
I will not push back on you, but I will challenge this idea, right? Because I agree with you. I think historically post-adjudication spaces have done that as well, and we're going to mandate this thing. I think the coaching model applies post-adjudication as well, where people do need agency. None of us we're all adults, right? In the adult side, even 15-year-olds want agency. People want agency. They want space. They want to be able. What they don't get to choose. I mean, they do. They have free will, so they get to still commit crimes and not show up to court. But the North Star is stay out of trouble and come back. They should be able to choose how they get there, right? That's the agency part, is like, what do I need to help support me to get that thing up there? That's sort of where you want to be. Christian, I see your chat. So I think one of the things that is true often is assessments. We've gotten into this box of like, it has to be structured interview and it's got to be question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. I would even say in the post-adjudicated tools, sort of moving away from that model and being much more exploratory and conversational. We get much more information when you look at the research. You get much more information from people when you're exploring their space and listening and just being reflective than we are asking structured questions, right? And so, but one of the things that I think Hillary's working on, one of the things we're working on at JSP is a tier 2, what we call a tier 2 tool. So tier 1 is the traditional risk assessment. I think that's still important. I think we should know, right? Because our pretrial departments don't have unlimited resources. We don't have all the staff that we would love to have for every person who goes through court. And some people don't need us. They can come back to court. They have their own resources and their own agency. I think for me, the most ideal model would be a traditional looking risk assessment on the front end, and anyone identified not low risk is shifted over to pretrial services, not pretrial supervision, right? Pretrial services, and that model really is designed to say, where are you? What's standing in your way? And how can we help? And we start to dig into and have a better sense. So we're actually building a tier 2 tool right now. We've been working in Illinois for the last couple of years to build it. We're testing it out in a couple of different jurisdictions across the country to see, can we create a validated tool? Because the thing we don't have are unlimited resources. So we can't say, if childcare really isn't a barrier to this individual, we can't pay for childcare for someone if it doesn't really affect them getting to court. And so we've got to be really conscientious, I think, of understanding what are the drivers for individuals, and what helps them may not be exactly what helps everyone else. And so I think that's an important place to start to think about, like, how we do this work. And so I want to sort of get you to talk about, and I'll probably start the conversation and then sort of we can back and forth. But I think our pre-trial model for the last 40 years, if you will, is really around compliance-based monitoring, right? It's about getting people to comply. And that's how we even created the referee model, right? The referee model is like, we're going to have rules, we're going to hold you accountable to them, and we're going to monitor you, and we're going to do things that are going to monitor you closely. So we're going to drug test the hell out of you. We're going to put electronic monitoring on you. We're going to surveil you with digital stuff. We're going to put a tracker on your phone. We're going to have you come check in, right? I remember, like, people would come and see their pretrial officer in Harris and then not go to court. And the reason why is because we use their social capital to show up to the pretrial person and show up to drug testing 3 times. And so the person they asked for a ride was like, dude, I've given you a ride 4 times. How many times do I have to give you a ride? And so they missed court, but they showed up to all the events before it, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense when we start to think about, like, I got to come see you to remind you that you're supposed to go to court and I'm supposed to pee in a cup and do all these things. Like, I think in times that's what does interfere, but it's like, nope, we're going to get you complying. Our focus is adherence. When we shift to a success base, the focus is the person, right? It's centered on the person. How can we best help you show up? And yeah, look, there are some people, and this is Brian talking, not representing NAPSA or Hillary or Cass County. There are some people who probably should be in jail on pretrial. Like, that, it is true. Like, I think about people who use really serious violence and are at risk of using it again. Like, I don't want them. I get they're not convicted yet, but I think there is a balance between what is the threat to the community and what people have, right? So I think there is some piece of that. But for our staff who are providing services to people in the community, their job really is, I think, to connect them to success. And so their focus is, what can I do to best serve this person to get them to show back up and stay out of trouble? And how do I do that? I don't know, Hillary, your thoughts on, like, how do you see, or how have you seen this sort of shift from compliance to success-based supervision?
To me, I really think the compliance-based supervision is rooted out of fear that if I overload this person with conditions, that it's going to fix the person and make the community safer. And that really isn't the key. And I talk about electronic monitoring a lot. Is oftentimes when I get overly focused on the compliance-based side, is I actually make that person fail. And I create the consequence that we didn't want. And there are times where we do have to bench the player. And sometimes someone, is a risk. And, That's why we reserve the jail resources for those who are a risk to the community. But when I'm focusing and then I'm instilling fear on person, or I'm using up all their resources to come and see me and over supervise that, or maybe sometimes I'm so stuck in the box on how they report and I'm not being innovative with Zoom or telephonic reporting, I'm creating failure versus promoting success. And to kind of answer what was going on in the chat, it is not about a conveyor belt system. And sometimes it can seem that staff is already overloaded. Why would we add one more thing? I would argue that the coaching model helps you sift out what's important, and that you are actually going to take away a lot of the stuff that's weighing you down, and you're going to focus on things that are going to help that person be successful. They're going to help you stay true to the purpose of pretrial. You're going to have more people remain arrest-free and come back to court, and then everybody's going to be happy because we're investing in that person versus getting bogged down, whether it's on extra assessments, it's on EM, it's on court ordered conditions that really turn people off, and they're not going to want to do that anyway. And we get that opposite effect. So I believe there is a world where you can have supportive services and coaching, you can have public safety when we focus on the person instead of on creating a false sense of security by upping the compliance or the conditions for that person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I call it mashed potatoes for pretrial often, right? It's a comfort food. We give people things that we think are going to do the job to be done, and then we see them fail and we blame the person versus really looking at the things that we did. Like maybe the thing we did didn't help, but it's the person's fault it didn't help. And it's like, no, actually, it's the intervention that really, if you really try to align them from what is standing in their way to being successful, the intervention will never help them show up. It'll never help them get out of trouble. And, I really appreciate you capturing that, the thought, because Samantha, you asked the question about caseload size and workload, and Gabrielle, you did the same thing. And like what that is, right? And I think that's a really good key point, is that coaching isn't necessarily more work. It's not harder or easier. It really is a mindset shift. It's a mindset shift. And so it prioritizes what's the job to be done, what's important, right? If you think about like how many of us believe a relationship or a connection is important to move someone in a direction, right? I do. Like I remember when my kids, so I have 3 teenage boys, and when the 2 youngest were 6 and 4, I was at the park. We lived in Houston, and I was at the park, and this woman comes up to me and says, "Hey, I've been watching you for a couple minutes." And my first response working in the criminal justice system is that's really creepy. But I got over the creepy part of it and said, yeah, okay. And she said, do you care if I give you some parenting advice? And I looked at her like she was crazy. It could have been the greatest advice ever. It could have saved me 20 years of therapy with our kids in the future, and sort of they could be better people and better humans for that advice. And I didn't receive it. Not because I have a huge ego or because I couldn't learn. It's because I didn't have a relationship with the person. I didn't understand the context in which they were giving it. I didn't know if they cared about me, if they wanted me to be successful, didn't want me to be successful. Advice without relationship is rejected. Reinforcers without relationship is rejected. Feedback without relationship is rejected. Punishments without relationships are rejected. And so when we try to use these evidence-based practices and we sort of engage treatment program or engage like reinforcers and punishers, you got to have a solid relationship with someone so that they know you have their best interest in mind. And I think that's where part of our work is separated or misconstrued or misaligned, is that to get people to do things, a relationship is necessary but not sufficient. but it's necessary, right? We're never going to get people to do something without a relationship. And I think that's one of the key points. And so the caseload size for me matters, right? I think we should push to get lower caseloads. I think we should resource our staff and our organizations better so that they can have a reasonably sized group of people to connect with and help and work with. I think there are things that we can do to increase or decrease that by really taking out, as Hillary said, some of the things that are administrative, right? So I was talking to people, I think we all would raise our hand and say, that relationship is incredibly important to get someone to move. I was talking to this agency, they're like, well, we can't build rapport, connection with people for the first session because we have 46 pieces of paper for them to sign. And I'm like, well, why are they signing 46 pieces of paper? And they're like, well, this and this and this and this and this and this. And I said, well, then the job to be done, if you believe relationships are important, the job to be done is to figure out how to not have to sign 46 pieces of paper, not say, well, we can't do anything about it. And so we've got to challenge our system, right? We've got to challenge what's available and what's not, how we do it. So one of the things that we connect with, right? And so we'll talk about this in a minute, right? Is like when we think about the coaching model, it's not just a shift in the staff person's actions, right? It's actually a shift in the organization and the culture that's around that system as well. One of the amazing things that Hillary has had an opportunity to see and do within CAS is the judges are on board. They want their staff to be coaches. Like they get it, they understand, right? And so it's so much easier. Like I've worked in systems and connecting with people that the judges don't get it. And so then it's harder. It's misalignment. I want you to do this, pretrial officer, but it's misaligned with sort of that piece. And so having all of your people together, right? And so this is an image we're starting to think about, right? Like, so people thriving, right? And people that are thriving. And I think one of the things that I love about pretrial that we do not get in post adjudication. We get it in pretrial diversion, and I see the power of it. So in Harris, we had a pretrial diversion program that we ran in the probation department. And so people got arrested for a possession of controlled substance or for a DUI. And within a month, they were in our pretrial diversion program. So we saw them at their toughest moments. We saw them at their struggles. We saw them at the point where they want to change. Now, fast forward, you put them on probation. Sometimes they've stabilized their life. They've sort of balanced things out. They're a year from their offense or 2 years from their offense at times. Pretrial has the unbelievable opportunity to engage people in sometimes their most struggling moment. And this is why I think it's important. When we think about people thriving, we think about the staff thriving, connected to purpose. We think about the people who move through our system thriving, making sure that they're showing up, being successful, moving forward in their life, having a path forward. And then when we think about all of it, it's not just the staff person that has to do this. The organization has to align their policies, their hiring and training process. The environment has to speak to this. I know Hillary has done a lot with her team in building an environment that looks different. So when the person under pretrial comes into their space, it tells a story of success. It doesn't tell a story of catch you and fail. You have to build stories around it, right? Hillary said this earlier. That the stories, the artifacts that sit in our agencies are often designed and developed by a bad story, right? We get shaped by something bad happening, and then we got to try to fix that. And There was no solution to that bad thing happening, but we try to fix it. We have to replace those stories with the 90% or 88% of people who are successful on this process and tell those stories as well. We need community partners, right? And we need people in the system to be part of the team. And I think that's one of the things I'd love to hear from you, Hillary, is like the referee model is us versus them. It's we're going to give something, we're going to observe you, we're going to monitor you, we're going to catch you, and you're going to try to avoid us. The coaching model is we're going to hold you accountable. We're going to inspire you and motivate you, but we're on the same team. And I'm curious, how is your staff? How actually, let's go with the people in your system. How have they been able to make the transition that pretrial is not to catch them failing, but is truly about being on their team and helping them win, helping them get to the finish line successfully without falling out, without falling over, without falling through? How does pretrial do that?
I think what we've done as a system, and that's what makes us different, is that every actor in our system, whether it's our prosecutor or our public defender or our judge, we all have different little objectives, but our goal is the same. We want a safer community, and by doing that, we want that person to be successful, and we need to believe in that person. So we all might have different objectives or way we're going there, but we recognize that we all have to invest in helping that person do that when we interact with them. Whether it's from that very first interaction, my sheriff has worked with those correctional officers in the jail to really change that culture and treat those people with dignity and humanity from that very first booking experience, and make space for pretrial to be there within hours of arrest. As well, whether it's my judge telling them that they can be successful, or even challenging that prosecutor. Hey, prosecutor, this person doesn't need the drug testing or the electronic monitoring that you're asking for. That's over conditioning. That's too much. They can be successful without that. As well, whether it's my public defender being in there and advocating alongside that person as well to do that. That is how everyone comes together to do that with our environment and our organization. That's my county commissioners believing in what we're doing and giving us the space to do it. We've done it right in the courthouse so that we remove one more barrier for someone. They don't have to go to another building. We believe they're worthy enough that they belong in the building with us, and that they can come and meet with us here and do that. That did wonders for removing stigma in our county, because people are coming in and reporting to pretrial sometimes in their worst moments, seeking help right there where the prosecutors, the judges, the public defenders, the court reporters live. They're just as worthy as we are, and that sent a message to those people as well. So it really kind of, the logo is the heart behind how each one of it does, is people-centered public safety, and we believe that they matter in the community just as much as we do. And that really has created that shift to where when Brian's staff person showed me this, I was like, yes, this is what we are. I was like, yes, Franca, this is what we're trying to do, is create that every intercept where they interact, they feel supported. And when we do that, our staff seamlessly step in there and do that. And I think that's kind of what's created that secret sauce to that change, to do that. And that's breaking down those silos. So I know a lot of you in pretrial, you feel isolated and that you can't recommend for release and advocate for your client in this way. But when we remove those silos and those barriers in our workspace, just like we're trying to do with the clients, we create this environment where someone can actually thrive.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, right, one of the things about the coaching model that I'm really excited about is this idea that it's not just on the staff person to do the work, right? It really is an organizational model of change that has to sort of permeate across all aspects, right? So you said the judge, right? Like I remember we were talking to the judge, and she was like, "Well, how can I set people up for success coming over to pretrial?" So we had a conversation, and like we all know we don't like to role play, but this judge was role playing with me about what the conversation could look like for a person, and so it was like, "Look, I'm giving you my best pretrial officer." So that you can be successful. I want to see you be successful during this process, regardless of what the outcome is. I want to see you be successful through this. So I'm going to give you Hillary and her team, and they're there to support you every step of the way so that you can be successful and you can get this process through and take your next step, right? Imagine a system that a judge says that to a person, what it feels like. I remember when I tore my Achilles, I was 48 years old. I had played sports all my life, right? I have three teenage kids at the time. They were a little younger, and I coached and I played still. And when I tore my Achilles, I went to the orthopedic surgeon and he said, "Well, what's your plan? Like, what do you want?" I'm like, "I want to get back to, if not better than, what I was before." Because the Achilles hurt before, it was torn. And so I was struggling. And he said, "Are you serious?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he's like, "Are you willing to put in the work?" And I said, "Yes." This is what he said. Probably a complete lie. He probably went to Brian's coach referee model for change training someday. But this is what he said. "I have the perfect physical therapist for you. Kara is amazing. I reserve her for people who are serious because she's really busy. But I'm going to send you over to her because I truly believe that you're going to be successful and you want to make this happen." And I went over there believing I couldn't let Kara down. Like I couldn't let her down. I had to show up. I had to do my best, right? And then I show up and I have this conversation with her and I tell her, "Look, I travel a lot for work. And this has been the problem with physical therapy in the past is I've had to miss stuff." She said, "Here's the deal. If you have a flight, we open at 7. If you have a flight and you got to get in here before 7, I will come open the shop up and do your treatments for you. Then you can get on your flight." I didn't take advantage of that every week, but there were 2 times in the 6 months of my recovery where I did ask her if she could come in at 5:15 because my flight was at 9. It was the latest I could book out. And she did. She showed up, turned the lights on at 5:15 so that I could be successful. Like, I imagine that, right? Like, no matter how big or small our caseloads are, if we could show up for people and we can build a system around them that supports them, and we can build a system around them that says, "Look, regardless of what you did, regardless of the harm," right? The victim is important here too, right? I want victims to be safe. I don't want people to be harmed, right? Regardless of those things, you're still a human being. You still have rights, and we still have the ability to create a path for you to success, regardless of what the outcome of the offense is. And I think that's what's really cool about the model and about how we could restructure the way we do pretrial across this country is really thinking about our job is not to administer the rules of the court. Our job really is to help people be successful in navigating a really tough time in their life. And I think that's the cool part, right? So we talked about these dimensions, 4 dimensions to a coach: approach, connections, playbook, success. And so when we train staff, right? So we use a individualized training tool called journeys.do. But the way we train staff is taking people on an individual path across these 4 dimensions and helping them connect to them, understand them in the context of their own job, and then share with them, share with us, share with our coach how that works, how it works in their work. And then we shape and help them shape their thinking around this, right? So approaches people can change, individual paths forward, right? So we've got to individualize our interventions. We do way too much sort of group-based responses to people. It really needs to be about the individual. We're all humans. We all came to where we stand right now in a different way. We all have to create a path forward in a different way as well. Progress, not perfection, right? No one's perfect. And so when we look for perfection, we're always disappointed. When we look for progress, we see growth and development and movement, and then trying their best. And so Hillary talked about her staff with that. The connection invested in success, meaningful interaction. We care about people as a human, and we provide support and engagement. The playbooks are interesting, right? Because I think on pretrial, we probably need some more playbooks. We probably need to understand what it is that would help people coming back to court. We know court reminders are incredibly important, right? And so, how do we build those? How do we design those? How do we improve? And so, one of the things that we've been working with Hillary and her team is we've streamlined their case noting, right? We streamlined their data, their case notes or their chronos. We gave them a tool that was an AI infused case note taker. That AI note taker lets you record your session with a person under supervision or a person under pretrial. It's so that her staff don't have to take notes. They don't have to be down. They don't have to be in their computer. They get to be present with the human being and listen and have a conversation. The system's capturing that, writes the note for them. And then what's really cool is gives them feedback right after on the coaching model. So it says to them, hey, here's what you did really well on. Here's how you created the right connection. It gives them a score in each of these four dimensions. And here's where you can work. And Hillary, tell me about how have your staff leaned in to getting feedback on every interaction and like how have they responded to that kind of support, if you will, from as a staff member?
Well, I kind of want to tie it into someone in the chat, and I'm sorry I forget your name, but you say, how do we make space for this? It's because we're willing to be innovative and take away things that sometimes is really scary to take away. So we decided to take away our laptop and our notes that we sometimes hide behind and really connect to that person. And I know that it can be really hard for all of us to be that vulnerable to for that level of feedback, but my staff love it. And one of the ways they use it is I swear they talk to the bot more than they talk to me, but they are sitting there and they're asking it, how can I talk to this person to help them create a transportation plan for the next 3 weeks? Or how can I help them manage their time so they show up on time for court because they really struggle with time management? How can I help them make a breakthrough or outline some coping skills or handle this high-risk situation so that they aren't around the same people they are when they tend to get arrested? We want to keep them out of the system. So they're helping prep before that appointment so that that limited time with that person can be more intentional in helping them succeed while they're on pretrial. So it's not just about efficiency, it's about improving themselves so they can improve that time with that person, and that person gets a better connection and a win at the end. So they really love and engage in that. And as me, as a supervisor, I love seeing them get excited about helping their people be successful. That fuels my day. And that really enforces the whole mindset behind what we do, right? They're not in here dreading come to work or thinking that they're going to catch people fail or worried that someone's going to fail. They show up energized. How can I be creative in helping this person be successful? And we're a rural county. I don't have a lot of resources and stuff like that. So we have to be creative with that, and that helps us do that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it gives you so using technology in that way helps your staff prep and sort of prepare for and learn and grow, but it also gives them feedback about their interaction, right? And so I know that you've built in that system a lot of feedback loops around understanding, right? So we've got the coaching connection easy button where you just push a button and it gives you sort of your staff's layout. It lets staff do that, right? So one of the cool things that we've done in Maricopa, for example, is we all know it's really tough to role play. It's scary. it's no one likes having their supervisor sit in a session. And and then often what happens, right? We record those sessions and then 90 days later we get feedback about something that we've already done or it's one off. And so what's really cool, I think, is we start to think about technology and its utility. We start to be able to see the trends across programs and across people and start to really match people to the right people under the right circumstances and grow skills. And so let's pause there, right? That's the coaching model as we think about it. Hillary, you've done a lot of this and sort of, the outcomes. I know we have a couple minutes left. We've got a couple questions. Um, let me ask you to sort of tell us about this, about what you've seen. And then as you're doing that, I'm going to sort of feed in some of the questions and answers that folks have in our last 4 minutes.
What we've seen is because we're able to help people be more successful with this model is that one, we're better honoring that person's dignity and humanity. So we're more true to me what the essence of pretrial is that protecting the rights of that person and helping them navigate the system. So we're more true to the essence of what our field is really about. But I think for us is we're more confident in our decisions, not just me, but my judges are. So we can make those release decisions faster because the judges are confident that we have a system in place that makes sure that really we have an 87% release rate, that we can release 87% of the people and that they're going to be successful 95% of the time returning to court.
Let me remind you, she's in Indiana and she released 86% of the people.
And that's lowered our pretrial detainees by 86%. And that's helped us do that. And one of the questions that I get a lot, and I saw a little bit in the chat, is will people engage? How do we do that? 76% of the people voluntarily engage in our supportive services model. And you can go on the NAPSA website, and there's another webinar that another board member did with me on supportive services to learn more about that. But they want to change, and that really energized the whole system. To tie in one of the questions, one of the ways that we quickly assess people and connect them to people is with supplemental assessments. So there isn't a structured tool out there yet that's validated, but the ACOK is simple. It's like 5 questions and it's free online and you don't have to be trained to do it. And that's one of the things that we first implemented to do that. And that helps us get people connected to services. 90% of the time, people are arrested, assessed by me, by the IRAS, or maybe for you, it's the PSA. They go see the judge, they're released to us, and then they're connected to those things that help them be successful. The name of the assessment tool, Jason, is the ACOK. And I will make sure that when we post the slides on the NAPSA website that I link that as well for you guys. But that's
I think that's, sorry, go ahead, Bill.
That's really just kind of the impact of what we've done is we kind of turned a system on its head a little bit in Cass County, where we were overcrowded and spending $3 million on a jail. And now it's at 40% capacity because most of them are safely out in the community and they're thriving.
Yeah, I think that's the cool part, right? Is like when we empower people to have access to resources, we give them people who are designed to be coaches with their best interest in mind. We get people to engage in the things that they are needed to help them be successful, right? 76%. Like, I think in some states, they would think you're lying. Right? That they would think that to get 76% engagement treatment that you've ordered it and that you're hiding it in some way. But what we realize, right, is that that's not true. Like people want access to support services. They're struggling and getting those to people, get them back on track quicker. And so we're at the end. There's some questions about the AI software that we've used or that Hillary's used. Feel free to email me. I can give you information on the Coach Ref model for change, the software piece. It is proprietary for Dwayne, your question. But I think really thinking about even in your spaces that you are, right? At the end of the day, it is, I think, the opportunity to help people be successful ties purpose to practice. It aligns our organizations. It brings people in the door. It helps tell a better story, right? It helps connect us to the resources and those. I think for me, the thing that shifts so that we can stop canceling our response system to crime and we can start leaning in and providing resources where they really belong is that we redesign how we think about people. It's not on some other team that we're standing in between and refereeing, but that the people who come to our system are on our own team in our own community, and that we're just a coach. We're a person there to help them navigate the system successfully. And hopefully, what I hope is that their next step from when they leave us to wherever they go is as successful as it possibly can, and that that step was better because we were engaged with them and that they are better off moving forward. So really excited. Thank you all. Wendy, thank you, and NAPSA for having us on. I look forward to seeing you all at the conference in August.
Yes, it's
August,
well,
right?
it's actually it's the last weekend of August, first of September, first couple days of September. So
Okay,
August
so
30th,
look
September
forward to
2nd.
seeing you guys at that conference. If you haven't signed up yet, the sign up will come in. If you have a presentation, please get it in. I'm sure that they're excited to share all of your information with the field as well.
Absolutely. Hillary, did you have any last comments?
Just thank you guys for taking your time, and you are amazingly engaging in the chat and stuff like that. And I love your comments about how you're just going to take away even one or two of these pieces that you can implement. It's going to energize you and it's going to make a difference. So thank you guys.
Well, wonderful. So thank you again to Brian and Hillary, such wonderful experts and colleagues and friends. Appreciate you being here today and giving of your time and your passion. And also thank you to all of you who attended today. As we mentioned before, this will be uploaded to our website, www.napsa.org. That's also where you can look for future webinars as well as information on our conference, like the fact that we are accepting proposals right now for this fall's conference. So thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.